All right, everyone, talk about old news. The other day, Jade Helm was trending, and I was like, oh, I wonder why. I wonder why. Are they finally revealing, oh, yeah, I was training for a larger Middle East war, and they finally declassified it because the situation changed? No, it was about Greg Abbott and the fact that you remember when he mobilized the Texas Guard. Because he's like, well, we're going to monitor these exercises because, we're concerned about this large number of troops roaming around in the state. And it was all very funny, and there were people that thought that it was a martial law takeover. Now, at the time, I had even a lot of people who seemed to like my work otherwise telling me I was nuts for not worrying about Jade Helm. And I told them, look at the map of Jade Helm. Look at the map of where it's located. Turn it about 45 degrees. What does it kind of look like? It looks like the Middle East. There was even a little tiny miniature Gaza Strip in California, which is like really funny. No, the Jade Helm training exercise, they didn't ever say this. They never admitted to it. They're just like, oh, it's a readiness exercise. The military doesn't want to talk about exactly why. It was a stand-in for a larger war in the Middle East. It overlapped perfectly with some of these states. It was literally perfect. Size-wise, it's even relatively similar. You got to realize the area of operation was gigantic. So that's really what it was about. However, because of the opaque nature with which the military conducts such readiness exercises, there were some people that were concerned. They're like, oh, there are going to be tanks going through the streets. Obama's going to take us over for socialism. And it's like, it was bullshit. But, some people, if people are hyper-religious, maybe they're more worried than others. Here's the thing, though. I don't personally choose to believe that Greg Abbott mobilized the state guard there because he was worried about the federal government taking over Texas and forcing him to put ketchup on his hamburgers. I don't think that for a second. No, I think what happened is Greg Abbott very wisely realized, hey, there are people in my state that are heavily armed. They're already jumpy because they think that Obama isn't even from the United States. Now all of these troops are going to be running around. This might cause a live fire situation that I don't want to have to deal with. I don't want to end up getting kicked out of office, impeached, removed from office because I failed to do anything to take care of the fears of the population. His responsibility was only to the people of Texas. I think it was a good idea for him to come out and say, okay, well, yeah, the state guard's going to be observing them. If any funny business happens, we have more firepower than the federal troops would be here anyway, which would be absolutely true, especially when you add in all the civilians, which is what he was worried about. He's not being a conspiracy theorist. And then their justification for bothering to talk about this, because they didn't really give a fuck, was, oh, Russians caused the alarmism. No, they didn't. I was, on YouTube at the time looking around at a lot of Jade Helm stuff because, that side of YouTube is interesting. I can personally vouch for the character of a lot of the bigger uploaders that were talking about it, and they were saying the same thing. They didn't wait for the mainstream media. Some of these people were talking about it quite some time, honestly, before it became a mainstream topic, or at least a secondary topic that was popular on YouTube and elsewhere. It doesn't... Why is it that Russia is being used as a justification for literally every fucking thing under the sun at this point? The DNC really opened a can of worms. I wonder if they wish that they could put all of those crawly things back in at this point. Oh shit, we created a monster. We just wanted to be able to use Russia as a scapegoat for why we had poor server security. And so people wouldn't look too much into all their dirty dealings of the DNC and the Podesta people, now that our emails are. We'll just blame Russia, so hopefully the partisans at least will lay off of us. Even though the emails show that we're totally complicit in a nationwide web of stupidity and corruption, we can't even manage a fucking server. That should have been front page news at the time. Instead, front page news was DNC claims Russia hacked us. What proof do you have? Absolutely none, but I'm supposed to just take it on a token. I'm also supposed to take it on a token that this is true. No, you know what I'm going to assume is that the weird side of YouTube and the weird side of everywhere else online just has a tendency to generate weird conspiracies. It's just like end time prophecies. Russia doesn't need to be involved. Oh, the world's going to end sometime in late May. No, it's not. And Russia's not responsible for feeding that to people. The funny thing is, at this point, it's like the boy who cried wolf. Because there is Russian propaganda that occurs, certainly that's aimed at the U.S., but it's going to be difficult to tell what is what at this point because they claim every little inconvenience has Russian fingerprints on it. Don't you see how that's detrimental to our national security and to our culture, at least to some degree, I would think? The funny part is, in some of these cases, it's not Russian propaganda, it's U.S. propaganda. Now, about a difficult issue like the DNC servers or rogue FBI agents. Oh, it was Russia. Well, that itself is the propaganda. The funny part is, though, if you claim it was Russian propaganda the whole time, nobody calls you a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist for it now, do they? They say, oh yeah, the Russians do that. So you don't think that our own government engages in propaganda? Look, one thing Obama provably did do is rip apart the bill that prevented the federal government from utilizing domestic media as propaganda. They can literally go to CNN or MSNBC and put out, fake government material now. It's not a joke. It's not a conspiracy. It's reality. There was a prohibition on that for a long time. They tore up the prohibition. The reason why the prohibition was in effect originally, I believe the intent was to set us aside from the Soviet Union, say, well, they do state propaganda. We have a free media. We're better. Our people can trust the government because we're more transparent. That's the whole point. It was the whole strategy. By the way, it worked. Apparently, the modern government here doesn't give a fuck about that sort of stuff. No, we're gonna be more opaque than anybody else. We're also gonna blame others for our problems. As far as Abbott goes, he made the right decision. Don't you see how it could be a little bit of a problem? If a bunch of U.S. soldiers are roaming through the streets, Abbott does nothing, says, they're just operating. Don't worry about it too much, folks. And then they're like walking down the street heavily armed. Don't you think that might get people a little bit jumpy and nervous? I know I would be jumpy and nervous. Look, if a Abrams tank were to roll down the street right now, I'd be like, come on, I wonder what's going on. People, if they're intelligent at all, they're not totally mind numb, they take notice of these sorts of things. It's like every time that a train loaded down with troop carriers or something goes down through, someone records it and says, oh, martial law's coming. Well, they're totally wrong, but it's worth your while to notice it. When did being vigilant equal being a lunatic anyway? It's like when people talk, like back in the 50s and 60s, people had fallout shelters a lot, or they'd retrofit part of their basement and stuff. Government put out circulations about how it was a great idea to do this, by the way. You have to do your part. We must rise from the ashes if there's a nuclear war. Be prepared. Hope for the best, but expect the worst, essentially. The Civil Defense Force and all this stuff. When did we get to the point where we look back at that, chuckle at it, and we sort of look sideways at people who are prepared for anything? It's like that bomb shelter can also be used as a storm shelter. You do realize that, but you're going to assume your neighbor's nuts for having a gun and a couple of cans of soup to last a week. Yeah, okay. As far as Jade Helm goes, though, no. Those of us with sanity understood. I took one look at the map. I'm like, oh, I can tell you what this is. It's that little strip in California that sort of gave it away. A lot of people didn't, but I mean, who cares? If Abbott's like, hey, I do have people who are nuts in my state that think martial law is coming anyway. On a good day, they think Obama's about to throttle their liberty out of existence. Shouldn't I take some sort of step to safeguard my state from violence? Not because I'm worried about a hostile federal takeover. I'm worried about, someone goes nuts and starts shooting at the U.S. soldiers that are walking down the street. Don't you think that could be bad for my image and bad for this state? Yeah, absolutely. So, Greg Abbott made the right decision. I say this as someone who, I'm not completely on board with the sort of Abbott style of Texas politics. There are plenty of social, moral issues on which I deeply deviate from such people, certainly on any religious token. But he did what was right. He did what was necessary, and it had nothing to do with Russia. That's about all. Peace out.